system also has two divisions, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system activates the body's resources and prepares the body to move quickly in high-stress situations. The parasympathetic nervous system returns the body to a resting state after a stressful situation has ended. The autonomic nervous system in action. If you have ever been in a car accident or even narrowly avoided one, you've experienced your autonomic nervous system in action. In the seconds before a crash, the sympathetic nervous system sends out signals meant to help prepare your body for impact. Your pupils dilate to enhance your vision so you can see what's going on. Your heart beats faster, and your breathing quickens to send more oxygen and blood to your skeletal muscles so they can spring into action. Your liver releases more glucose to help power your muscles, and epinephrine causes those same muscles to contract as you tighten your grip on the steering wheel. Because of all this increased activity, you'll likely start sweating, a response meant to prevent your body from overheating. Even your stomach and bladder are affected as the blood and energy normally used for digestion is quickly diverted to your skeletal muscles. This is why you may feel nauseated or even lose bladder control in a tense situation. All of these physiological changes are part of what is called a fight or flight response. The autonomic nervous system isn't only activated in threatening situations.
Hello,
As
come
nerve
inside.
impulses select based on the feelings of tension and excitement that accompany them, high-pressure events, such as a job interview or a first date, or even fun activities, such as riding a roller coaster or meeting a celebrity, can trigger an intense response from the sympathetic nervous system. Up to this point, we've looked at a number of ways in which the mind and body interact through the nervous system. When the nervous system sends signals throughout the body via neurotransmitters, our brains are able to interpret those signals, and our bodies are able to react to the stimuli that cause them. But the interplay between the mind and body is also influenced through a separate system known as the endocrine system, which controls the release of hormones. Hormones and neurotransmitters are both chemical messengers. But unlike neurotransmitters, which is hormones are released by the endocrine glands, which include the pineal and pituitary
Let's
glands
chat,
in the
chit,
brain,
chit, chat,
the
chat, chat,
thyroid in the
chat,
neck,
chat.
the adrenal glands, the
Chat.
pancreas and the abdomen, and the gonads, ovaries, and testes in the groin area. The pineal gland releases melatonin, a hormone that helps regulate our sleep and wake cycles. The pituitary gland is controlled by the hypothalamus, which spurs the gland to release growth hormones that stimulate the development of bones, muscle, and cartilage. The pituitary gland receives its directions from the hypothalamus and also controls nearly all of the other important glands in the endocrine system. Figure 12. The endocrine system and glands. Multiple choice question. Which of these does the pineal
Stay
gland
forever
regulate?
until the end of. Do you know the? No, tell me about it.
The process through which the body
Tell me
turns
about the Stray
an excess or
Kids.
shortage of thyroid hormones can impact metabolism and lead to extreme fluctuations in weight. Beyond physical symptoms, thyroid imbalances can also affect mood and memory. For instance, the hippocampus, the brain structure involved in memory formation, is rich in thyroid receptors. Research has found decreased hippocampal volume in adults with hypothyroidism, a condition in which the body does not produce enough thyroid hormone, Cook et al., 2014. The endocrine system can also have an effect on our emotions. Oxytocin, a hormone released from the pituitary gland, influences the feelings of bonding and trust linked to social interactions. Testosterone, released by the testes and the ovaries, is linked to aggression and sexual desire. As our hormone levels change throughout puberty, during menstruation and pregnancy, and even as we age, we may notice differences in our emotional reactions to certain people or situations. You may already be familiar with two of the hormones secreted by the
Yeah,
Many new mothers who use a machine to pump breast milk find that looking at a picture of their infant or hearing their baby cry causes their milk to start flowing more quickly. It's likely that these reminders of their infant release oxytocin. Oxytocin also plays a role in sexual relationships. The so-called love hormone is released during orgasm and influences the release of dopamine in the brain's reward system. This release makes people feel euphoric after sex, and it often causes
After sex.
In these and in many other ways, our lives are the product of countless tiny messages being sent from the mind to the body and from the body back to the mind in an endless, ongoing cycle of communication. We've just learned a lot about the brain and the specific structures within it, but it's important to remember that no two brains are exactly the same. Unlike cars or computers, brains are not produced in a factory according to precise specifications. Your brain developed based on a general set of guidelines in your genes, drawn from a diverse set of options that you inherited. Even before birth, the wiring of your brain was different from anyone else's. Then, as you grew, your experiences further shaped your brain, making it uniquely yours. What is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is a concept that emphasizes respect for the many differences in brain functioning, just as we should respect and strive to understand any other human variation. The symptoms or characteristics related to psychological disorders such as ADHD, autism, and dyslexia are examples of differences in brain functioning. Under the medical model that has traditionally influenced psychology, differences in neurological functioning are seen as something to be cured or fixed by changing behavior or altering brain chemistry. However, neurodiversity advocates, such as the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, argue that these differences are evidence of a wide variation in neurological functioning. Differences, not deficits. Whether you look at skin color or height, IQ scores or personality, humans are all different. According to the evolutionary perspective, variation is critical to our adaptation and survival. Traits that are not adaptive do not get passed on. Looking back at historical figures like Mozart and Einstein, we can see variations in intelligence and characteristics that today might be associated with disorders such as autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, Silverman, 2015. The fact that these variations are not new suggests that each is a normal variation of neurological functioning. Neurodiversity advocates believe that these variations remain in the gene pool for a reason, includes looking at the different variations in how people think and perceive the world as strengths rather than weaknesses. The graphic below highlights some of the strengths of people with ADHD and of those on the autism spectrum, as well as the strengths they often share. Ethical judgments and neurodiversity. Psychologists see a need to research diverse brains while respecting the people who own them. Even as we embrace neurodiversity, we cannot ignore the personally distressing and even painful physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of autism, ADHD, and other disorders. Ethics demands how people face their challenges while respecting their individuality. Psychologists who embrace neurodiversity can help research and provide therapy and support in a way that does not pathologize or marginalize neurodiverse individuals, but that instead creates empowering opportunities. Psychologists can also advocate social changes that promote inclusion and reduce stigma.
Hi, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Mendes.
Brains are caused by environments and
It's a
social
long time I have not
that
seen
are
you.
not designed with them in mind.
How are you doing?
Small changes can make big improvements in the lives of neurodiverse individuals.
Hi, how are you?
Allowing employees to wear noise-canceling headphones, giving all students the option to stand while they work, or simply understanding
How are you doing?
does not require eye contact.
Hello.
Psychologists who value neurodiversity
Where are you
can
from?
help us reshape environments so that differences
Where
are
are
not
you
treated as
from?
nature, nurture, and neurodiversity.
I know Mendes. I know where you're from.
Development in the rest of this chapter.
Philippines. Wow. Mabuhay, Philippines. Mabuhay.
And socially in a
I love Philippines.
As you read, keep in mind that these theories describe typical developmental patterns that may not fully capture every
Yeah, I know where you're from. Florida.
Remember that
One of these days, I'll visit Florida, Philippines. Merry Christmas. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too.
This variation in human functioning and development can help you strengthen your social awareness and empathy.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Human development, sometimes called lifespan development, is the process of physical, cognitive,
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Where are you from in Philippines? What province are you located?
pass through several major developmental stages. Prenatal development, which happens as you grow in the womb, infancy and childhood, adolescence, and early, middle, and late adulthood.
How was your Christmas, Mendes? How was your Thanksgiving, Christmas, will New Year be good?
You may have heard of the term.
How will you celebrate your New Year?
Describes the ongoing and ever-evolving process of studying whether nature, our genetics and biology, or nurture, our home environments, our relationships, and our cultural background.
Thank you for the heart.
Today,
Thank you
most
for the
molecular
heart.
psychologists and researchers who study this area generally agree that neither nature nor nurture has a greater influence. Both are vital in shaping the people we become. In this chapter, as we dive into the world of development,
Thank
we'll
you.
look at how it's influenced by nature and nurture. We'll also read about physical development, social development, and
No, I don't
cognitive
have kids.
development at each stage of life. In the pages that follow, we'll chart the course of the human lifespan,
I don't have
exploring
kids.
the major milestones that make
You
up
have
most of
kids?
our lives.
Mendes, you have
Obstacles
kids?
that can threaten healthy, normal development.
You're married? You're single?
Developmental psychology is still evolving. Many experts
Oh, okay. So, do you have kids? Are you single? Are you married? Okay. You have any question you want to ask?
Genetic and environmental influences on development. You may already know that genes control many of your physical qualities, such as your height and the color of your eyes. The genes we inherit from our parents and grandparents are expressed or activated in us. That's why family resemblances and heritable disorders exist. But did you know that much of your personality and intelligence is also rooted in your genes? Like an architect's blueprint, our genes serve as a sketch for how we will develop throughout our lives. And yet, just as a building's construction depends on the materials used and the design choices made after the foundation has been poured, our environment can, and often does, alter the original sketch laid out by our genes. On this page, we draw from the behavior genetics perspective to understand how this all happens. Let's take a closer look. Genes and expression. Our genes contain the genetic instructions that influence our physical, biological, and psychological characteristics. Genes influence everything from our height and hair texture to our risk for certain diseases or mental disorders. they are turned on or off affect our phenotype. Key idea: you cannot observe a person's genotype. Think of phenotypes and genotypes this way. Type is a trait that's controlled by more than one gene. Your genotype contains information that determines a range of possible heights, which you inherited. Yet how tall you actually become is your phenotype. It's an observable physical trait that others can see. Our gift types
An individual complete set of genes. Hello, my friend. I think this is Salam Alaikum.
Our environment doesn't just influence the expression of our genes. Remarkably, it can actually alter them. Some experiences leave chemical markers on genes that may be passed down to offspring. This is known as epigenetics. There is mounting evidence indicating that negative events, such as prolonged malnutrition or even isolated instances of emotional trauma, can leave epigenetic markers for the rest of a person's life, and may continue affecting the expression of those genes for generations. Curry, 2019. Unlike regular gene expression, however, there is research suggesting that in some cases, epigenetic expression may be reversible. Just as our genes shape our development, our environment can shape our genes. Growing up in a house near a factory that emits toxic chemicals or suffering abuse as a child could cause epigenetic changes within a person by essentially turning off molecules that are helpful in healthy brain development. At the same time, research suggests that growing up in a neighborhood with clean air and a home full of loving, supportive family members can turn up the force of those molecules.
Good boy. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just resourcing some project. I'm just doing some project.
Our environments shape how we develop as we grow up, and so too can our phenotypes. The outward expression of our genes might lead others to treat us in ways that will, in turn, create epigenetic changes within us. Consider a group of siblings who grew up in the same household. If they share the same biological parents, both their genes and their environment are probably similar. However, unless they are identical multiples, such as twins, the siblings' genotypes will be unique. Because of this, there will be differences in each child's experience of growing up. For example, the firstborn child lived without a sibling for a period of time during which the parents had less experience raising children. Perhaps the parents were more nervous and less distracted with that first child than they were when the second child came into the picture. Birth order aside, parents might treat their children differently, based in part on each child's phenotypes. One child may be more emotionally dependent, one child may be more compliant, and another may be more likely to have temper tantrums. These phenotypic differences affect the environment that each sibling experiences.
Hey, Lanya!
And how the
Merry
children
Christmas!
are most formative
Happy New Year!
as children can affect the very blueprints
Todo balik
that
kita
form how we
Christmas.
grow throughout our lives. Multiple choice question.
Merry Christmas, like my friend. What's the Christmas? Christmas. What is the date today? Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve, I greet you a very wonderful, beautiful Christmas greeting from us here, from my mom, dad, me, to you and your husband and your children. Have a wonderful Christmas. What's the right answer? Also, so get the 4:30 a.m. Christmas Day here. It's a beautiful Christmas. Thank you very much. We had a very beautiful family Christmas occasion. The color of a person's eyes and hair. The color of a person's eyes.
psychologists separate the influence
Thank
of
you.
genes and
Thank you, Mel.
environment. The answer lies in two types of studies. The first type, known as twin studies, compares identical twins to non-identical twins. The second type, adoption studies, compares the phenotypes
Ih,
of adopted
nangis
children
si
to family
piling
members who
doon
share their
boka.
environment, the adopted family, with those who share their genes, the biological family. We'll also consider what psychologists have learned from studying identical twins who were raised in different environments. Twin studies. Studies of twins typically compare the similarities of traits between identical and fraternal, non-identical twins. Identical twins, also known as monozygotic twins, develop when one zygote, the term for a fertilized egg, splits into two. Simply speaking, identical twins share the same genotype and typically the same environment. Fraternal twins, in contrast, are dizygotic since they develop from two different eggs that happen to be fertilized at the same time. Although fraternal twins typically experience the same environment during early development, their genes are no more similar than those of siblings who are born years apart. If an environment has an overwhelming effect on a trait, then fraternal twins and other siblings growing up in the same environment would have nearly the same chance of being as similar to one another as identical twins. But if identical twins are more likely to share a trait than fraternal twins, then we can conclude that the cause of the trait is most likely due to genetics. For example, identical twins tend to score more similarly than fraternal twins on many psychological measures, such as intelligence, personality, educational success, and even self-esteem. Dury et al., 2009, Rowland, 2012, Diziu et al., 2016, Caprara et al., 2009. Adoption studies. Another popular way to untangle the relationship between environment and genetics is to study children who have been adopted. In these instances, researchers compare these children to their biological families and their adopted families. Unless they are adopted by close relatives, the children typically do not share a genotype with their adopted family members. At the same time, adopted children generally do not share an environment with their biological family members. If an adopted child's phenotype or a trait is more similar to their adopted family's phenotype than their biological family's, that trait can be reasonably attributed to the environment. For instance, if a child is adopted by a family of artists and intellectuals and then grows up to become artistic and intellectual themselves, we can reason that their phenotype developed this way because of their environment. But if an adopted child's phenotype or a trait is more similar to their biological family's phenotype, the trait is most likely caused by genetics. While environment does seem to have a greater influence on adopted children's attitudes, values, and beliefs, adoption studies reveal a strong genetic influence on intelligence and mental disorders. Koenig et al., 2005. Still, most adopted children benefit from the stable and dedicated environment that adoptive parents provide. Multiple choice question. Why do developmental
To learn more about how people's genes and environments influence their life. To learn more.
Occasionally, it's possible to study individuals who share genotypes but not the same environment. Today, it's generally considered unethical to separate twins for the sake of research, but such studies have happened in the past. In the 1970s, University of Minnesota psychologist Thomas Bouchard and his colleagues located and recruited 74 pairs of identical twins that had been raised apart. biological tests. The twins showed remarkable similarities in traits ranging from intelligence to political attitudes to phobias, Rochard et al. 1990. Since the study's conclusion, critics have pointed out that some of the twins were in close contact, that adoption agencies had deliberately placed them in similar homes, and that the results may not be as strong as Bouchard initially claimed, Joseph, 2014. Throughout the years, though, the Minnesota Twins Project has continued to examine the effect of different environments. On this page, we cover how genotypes, phenotypes, and environments interact with one another. Now that you're more familiar with how these three factors generally work together throughout human development, let's look at how development unfolds from womb to tomb, or from birth to death. On the pages that follow, we'll examine physical, social, and cognitive development at several important stages of life. On this page, we'll discuss prenatal development, the phase of development that happens in the womb. We'll focus mostly on physical development, since there's very little, if any, cognitive or socio-emotional development during this stage. And yet, while most development in the womb is physical and guided by genes, what happens to each of us during prenatal development can have lasting effects on the rest of our lives. To understand why, let's start by examining the three stages of prenatal physical growth. The germinal period. About half a day after the sperm merges with an egg, the sperm cells and the egg cells' DNA fuses. The two cells become one cell, known as a zygote. The next week and a half or so, during which the zygote travels from the fallopian tubes to the uterus, is called the germinal period. Once in the uterus, the zygote divides rapidly and exponentially. One cell divides into two cells, which divide into 4, then 8, and so on, until hundreds of identical cells have formed. Then, the cells begin to specialize. Some cells form along the outside of the zygote to create the beginnings of the placenta. Others begin If the zygote successfully implants into the uterine
Just
wall,
dance
the
like
next phase
nobody's
of prenatal
watching.
development begins, the embryonic period.
He's got some
That
good
takes from
moves.
about 2 to 8 weeks after fertilization. This is the stage
This
in which
mom captured the
specialized
moment her
cells
Down
begin to
syndrome
lay
son.
down the structural foundations of important organs. This period is crucial. If the embryo's organs do not develop properly, a miscarriage or birth defects may occur. Proper nutrition and avoidance of harmful substances such as drugs, alcohol, and undercooked raw or high mercury fish are important to ensure the embryo's organ development continues safely. The genetic anomalies or flaws in the blueprint might appear at this stage, potentially contributing to developmental defects. The fetal period. If embryonic development continues successfully, the fetal period begins at about 9 weeks after fertilization. During this period, the fetus clearly begins to appear human, limbs, fingers, facial features, and all vital organs are in place. And yet organ development is not anywhere near complete. The fetus still needs many more months for the eyes, lungs, brain, and nervous system to be fully functional. At about 4 months, the fetus begins to move, first by expressing uncontrolled reflexes as the nervous system forms neural connections with the fetus's muscles. As the fetus's nervous system develops during this period, so too do the fetus's senses. nervous systems are fully developed are capable of responding with a variety of reflexes that persist after birth, such as sucking, blinking, grasping, and swallowing. Since reflexes are unlearned reactions to environmental stimuli, their presence is generally an indication of healthy brain and nervous system. Although the process of prenatal development is largely controlled by genes, environmental factors can also have profound effects on how the embryo and fetus develop in the womb. The womb provides a usually safe and controlled environment for development. The placenta provides oxygenated blood and is capable of filtering out some chemicals or microorganisms that may be present in the mother's blood, yet harmful to a developing embryo or fetus. However, many chemicals and even viruses can get through the placenta, entering the bloodstream of the embryo or fetus. These toxins, or teratogens, can include alcohol, nicotine, and legal or illegal drugs. Long-term exposure or exposure to large doses of teratogens can have effects that are obvious at birth, such as low birth weight and the facial malformations associated with fetal alcohol syndrome. It's not ethical to expose embryos or fetuses to teratogens to study what lengths of exposure or dosages is tolerable. So it's best to avoid any substance that can negatively affect physical development in the womb, especially during the embryonic stage, when the embryo is most vulnerable to environmental impacts. Even small exposures can have lasting effects on cognitive and emotional development, effects that may not be apparent until years after birth. In some cases, these harmful exposures may cause behavioral problems, high blood pressure, pressure, obesity, and other physical or mental issues in adulthood. Multiple choice question. Low birth weight and facial malformations associated with fetal alcohol syndrome support which of the following statements. On this page, we've looked at how genes and environment impact development in the prenatal phase, the phase before we're born. Genetics play a large role in prenatal development, and sometimes birth defects or chromosomal disorders are included in the genetic blueprint. Embryos and fetuses are also vulnerable to environmental factors that can stop their genes from unfolding in a healthy way. But with care, attention, and avoidance of harmful substances, neonatal development often progresses normally. And after birth, a whole new phase of development begins. On the next few pages, we'll look at the next chronological stage of development, infancy and childhood. While prenatal development is mostly focused on physical development, a whole new world of social, emotional, and cognitive development opens up once a baby is born into the world. Let's take a closer look. Throughout infancy and childhood, children experience rapid physical,